Hey, David Brewster here with the Scales and Tales, and this is Harmonic Minor Mastery. And I know for a lot of guitarists and musicians out there, the harmonic minor scale is a very important, scale to kind of tackle and kind of get under your belt. So if you're not really familiar with it, or maybe, you've learned a couple Ingve licks, but you don't really understand, how this scale works, this lesson's going to help you big time. So I have mentioned the scale, in other episodes of Scales and Tales. I even devoted a whole, chord play episode to harmonic minor chord progressions. And just to kind of remind you, the reason why I'm putting it in the key of F, I mean, we can relocate this and play it in any key, anywhere on the fretboard. But the reason I like showing scales, as far as the introduction, or at least initially, in the key of F, is it allows us to play as low as possible on the fretboard without using open strings. So that way you can really see, like the distance between the notes. You can kind of get a feel for the shape. And I love using open strings, but when you're demonstrating the scale or learning a scale, open strings can kind of confuse your mind and your eyes because you may not really see, what you're doing when you use open strings. So the first thing we're going to look at here in the key of F is we're going to basically map out some octaves, or kind of using the octave linking concept that I've talked about in other episodes from Scales and Tales. So if you don't really know this octave linking idea, check out the Minor Scale Mastery episodes, and that'll kind of give you a clue as far as what we're doing here. So right there you can kind of map out that 6-note group in octaves like this. And I'm basically just starting on F, and then I jump up an octave and start on F again, jump up an octave and start on that F note, and once again we're just playing F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D flat. So right there we played the first 6 notes of the scale, and we kind of left the 7th, out of the picture. So in F natural minor, we would have an E flat for the 7th. Okay, that's what you would typically hear for F natural minor. But harmonic minor has a raised 7th, so that's going to change that E flat to E natural, and that's going to sound like this. And you can definitely hear that strong pull, from the chords. Now what you can do is you can use that mapped, octave linking idea where we just had 6 notes, like this. And all we're going to do is just add E natural to the mix. So we're going to add the 2nd fret there on the D. We're also going to add the 5th fret there on the B. And that's going to look like this. There's a ton of ways you can kind of move around the fretboard, using that scale. You really can't see it right here. Everything's kind of just streamlined and, kind of fits in that nice little position right there. But once you move away from, the root position, you're going to find some nasty stretches in the scale. And really, harmonic minor is one of the best kind of finger challenges or fret hand challenges out there because, all of the scale fingerings are very unique and interesting and stretchy. And, if you're primarily a minor pentatonic player or like major scales and stuff like that, these shapes and fingerings are going to feel really weird. So the first thing I would recommend if this is kind of a new world for you, is instead of practicing this, which you should practice it like that, and definitely do, the octave links idea that I just shared. But once you get used to kind of moving around like that, the first thing I would do is tackle the stretches head on, right? So, if you look here, you can't really see, visually, the gap between, basically D flat and E. And that's where it gets its very signature kind of telltale, sound. Want you to resolve it to F. It's just pulling you right toward the root. Look for that stretch, right? There's C, D flat, and E. Okay? And so that we're ending that phrase, a half step from the root. So that's one of the nasty stretches in this scale. And then just one fret higher, there's another nasty stretch. There's the D flat, the E, and then the root note, F. So the first thing I would do, once you're used to this, then I would start looking for that C, D flat, and E everywhere, right? And then mentally kind of get ready, to play with that stretch. Kind of get used to the way that feels. It's going to feel really weird at first. And then right there, you can just map that out everywhere that it happens. And then if you think of that, in combination with that kind of octave-linked version of the scale, you can come up with all kinds of cool patterns. So to kind of help you get used to those wide, interval stretches there, let's revert back to what we started with, but we're going to include that little shape, and we'll do something like this. And that's basically just grabbing that scale. And then right there, we're grabbing, the raised seventh at the end. And then walk back down. And then right there, we're basically, purposely grabbing that stretch right there. And then right there, you're going to do it again. Kind of weird. And then right there, you're going to do it again. Once you've uncovered where the stretches are and what notes, you're going to use for those, kind of wide interval fingerings, then you can kind of prepare for it and you can kind of get used to it, At first, it's going to feel really strange, but then over time, and by over time, I mean months and months, if not like a year of practicing this, it'll become second nature. You can play it in your sleep. But at the beginning, or initially, it's going to feel like you're climbing up a hill or going up a mountain. You're going to be like, yikes, but then eventually you'll start to get control and you'll know where those gaps and stretches are in your fret hand, and your ability is going to be used to it. You're going to get comfortable with it. So that's something big time I would target if you have trouble with the scale, especially when you get away from, like once you get away from those kind of, easier to grab fingerings, jump into some of those stretchy fingerings, because it's very, very challenging. Once you've kind of mapped out where those stretches are and like the wide interval, gaps here, then you can start doing things like this. So now we're going to start with F here, but we're going to shift into the next position. Something like that. And it's a really interesting way of kind of moving through the scale. Once you get used to this, that's kind of the next step of doing that type of idea. Pretty cool. Once you get used to some of these approaches and different ways of navigating through the scale, then you can start creating licks and phrases. And this is kind of a legato idea, almost like a Satriani kind of thing. It's a really weird, phrase, but it's a great, workout for your fret hand for sure. Any legato, players out there, you should find that to be a pretty big challenge. But we're doing this. And then it starts again. And then again. Something like that. Now there are a ton of, fingerings and patterns and licks and exercises and ways of moving the scale around the fretboard. And I'm just kind of giving you a few, off the beaten path or kind of different ideas. But you can approach the scale a lot of different ways. And one more idea I'll kind of share here, think around like the 8th position, like where that F minor bar chord lives. And there are these 2 fingering clusters that we can kind of uncover that live right there. And you can kind of think of that almost like a minor major 7 chord or minor major 9. And then you can definitely think of that as a major 7th chord, kind of like D flat major 7. But if you really look at the notes there's D flat, there's F, there's A flat, and C. All right, so all of those notes, live in F harmonic minor. Now the other cluster I just uncovered there, if you move it, the A, D, G, and B string. And by the way, minor major 7 chords, really bring out that harmonic minor kind of tonality and flavor. And if that's a new sound, I highly recommend, checking out the harmonic minor chord play episode that I created. It was like a month or 2 ago, I think. But I do talk about that chord in that episode. But right there you can see we've got A flat, there's C, there's E, and there's also G right there. So those notes are also found in harmonic minor. So the cool thing here is, we can play the scale. But you could also play with those 2 shapes. And you could sweep them, you could pick through them, you can kind of just mentally target those in your mind and come up with licks and phrases. And you can just kind of create all sorts of, interesting little twists and turns. Kind of using those little clusters of notes. There's a bunch of things you can do with the scale, and it's very useful, it's very, ear-catching and attention-getting for sure. So if you're, kind of new to this tonality or this scale, or like I said earlier, maybe you've just kind of learned a couple Ingve licks and you've heard harmonic minor, but you don't really understand what's going on. I hope this kind of brief look, gave you some insight and some ideas as far as, tackling the scale. And I know I was kind of using like an octave link concept and kind of moving around the fretboard this way. And you can definitely practice these scales, like in a single position too, just straight across the strings. Alright, that's going to wrap this brief look at the harmonic minor scale. So leave some feedback and comments. Let me know if you have any breakthroughs or any luck with this. And please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more chord play and 3-for-all and scales and tails and breaking chords and Brewster's Millions of Brands and everything else too. Thank you.